Greetings, everyone, and welcome. We're here and we've arrived to a very special roundtable discussion here at 3We Summit, brought to you by GatherVerse. We have incredible minds with us today to speak on the subject and the understanding of wellness and the approach to Web3. We have those that have assembled with us, you and the audience that's with us, to better understand that when we talk about Web3, what do we look at it from a wellness lens? It's going to be a very different discussion today. I'm so happy to be joined by those that are with us, Miss Mandy Morris, Alison Alexander, Evan Sitler, and Bei Wang. Let's take some time and each person introduce yourself. We'll start with Alison and we'll move on, and then we'll move on to an engaging discussion.
Hello, everybody, and thank you firstly for the invite to be here. It's a real pleasure. I've been watching some of your sessions during from the day from other events, and they're amazing, really amazing. So thank you. Yes. I'm Alison, co-founder of Metacampus, and at Metacampus we're quite clear. Our mission is to unlock the human potential through the tools of the metaverse. Big ambitions, but we think we can do this through 3 pillars, which are around education, which we'll talk lots about, which is about transformation. That education leads to transformation of how we all do business, and then through the growth of new startups coming into the Web3. So that's what we do, but more about that as we go on.
Bei, let's turn it over to you, please.
Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here again. We participated last year's GatherVerse event. It was truly a great experience. My name is Bei Wang. I'm based in the Netherlands, but I'm now also saying greeting to everyone from the 12verse. So I'm the co-founder of Straightfire Studios. We are a startup, a Web3 startup. We try to unleash the true potential of IPs, brands, and NFT projects in Web3 through creating digital content, immersive experiences, and long-term value for all stakeholders. At the same time, we also developed the world's first NFT social dApp. This is, you can call it a metaverse or a mini 3D stage where you can tell your NFT stories. At the same time, I'm also a university researcher in the area of digital culture. So I'm very happy to join this roundtable discussion with everyone.
Evan, please chime in.
Yes, thank you for having me, and it's so great to finally see you over video, Christopher. I think we've been connected for 2 years on LinkedIn now, and it's finally great to be here. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of xpertvr. We're a Canadian-based virtual reality development studio working in the education space. So we work across North America creating custom education simulations, as well as now starting to create textbook replacements through virtual reality simulations. So really excited to be here and talk on the education side. And Alison, we'll have to chat later as well, because it sounds like we have some great connections.
Mandy, we're happy to hear from you.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me back on. I enjoyed being on the roundtable discussion a few months ago at the other Metaverse, GatherVerse. Mandy Morris. I'm right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I'm an executive psychology coach. I help executives understand their own psychology, break through barriers that they're having or don't know that they're having, and then help them create a more optimized internal self so that they can have a better mental health and better business. I'm also co-founder of Mosaic Counseling Group, which is my private practice, my therapy private practice. I've had that practice since 2014. Work with people of all sorts of stages of life and issues, from any sort of mood disorder to addiction problems to relationships, most of all the stuff. And then I'm also a EMDR clinician, which is one of the most effective trauma treatments that there are out there. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Excellent. And thank you, everyone, for introducing yourselves. We're so very happy to have you. And it's time, let's chop wood and plant some seeds. Panel, I threw this out openly, and feel free if whoever wants to chime in. We look at Web3 and we talk about this, but I want to set the tone for this discussion and the whole summit moving forward of these next 2 days that we have together. And I want to bring it in from your lens, because it seems that around in every corner that everyone has a different perspective of Web3, rightfully so. But under the banner of wellness today, and I know that each of you will have something to contribute to this in a very unique and very different lens. It's one of the reasons why we assembled you as such. I ask, as our first question, from your own perspective, what is Web3 to you?
Can I just chime in?
Please, Bei.
Yes, because I'm both a practitioner and explorer of Web3 and metaverse, also as a researcher. I'm constantly in this journey of learning by doing and doing by learning. And there's a lot of discussion in different branches. And I think maybe due to the area I'm working in, maybe we try to really look into a specific area. So for us, or for me personally, but also for my team, we look at Web3 as the face of where that the users is no longer the product on the internet, but we are the owners of the content. And because I'm also facing a lot of young students, we try to explain to them in very short and very easy language. And so I think the key words is about ownership. So again, it's about the users no longer being a product of the internet. Yes. In Web3, we own the content.
And before we have Alison chime in, because it seems like she's ready to leap in, our audience, I want our audience to put in the chat thread, join us in on this dialogue of this curiosity from your lens of those that are with us today. Give us a little few in the chat box. What is Web3 to you? Come as you are and arrive as such. Alison.
Thank you. And I feel I'm going to say a bit of what Bei said as well, but that's why we're all here on this panel, actually, because we have that consistency. But for me, when I think of Web3, I think Web3 is absolutely the vehicle for equalizing the globe and changing the world economics. That's like the big picture of how I like to think about it. But I think for me, overall, my word I love most is about it's empowering. And I think it's empowering for what we've heard, that it's about the ability. I really love your statement, not the product, but the owner. I was going to say, but to be able to own our own information, our own identity, anything that's ours, and to be able to benefit from it ourselves. So moving from that centralized, someone else is gaining from my likes and dislikes, to actually, I get to monetize that and actually learn and gain from that, which therefore for me comes back also to that empowerment and how we really can change the economics of the world. This isn't about a few, this is about the whole. But I think the bit about the wellness bit for me around what is the metaverse is if I own it, I can carry it with me. And therefore, I'm much more empowered, whichever country, whichever location I am, I can own my identity, I can own my assets, I can own my credentials, and I can own my resource. And that puts me in a really powerful position. So for me, that's how I like to see it.
Mandy, I must ask, and I'm bringing you up to the forefront of highlight, as young Christian Brown and brought to us in the opening remarks in Paris, expressed to us about the importance of not putting Web3 in front of our health, but making sure that we're mindful of our health and our wellness in the approach to Web3. And there's a lot of people that have invested heavily in crypto assets. We find ourselves in a very interesting situation. Some would say that we're in what's called a crypto winter. And we see that a lot of people have lost not just a few hundred thousands and millions of dollars, but we're talking billions of dollars from these investments. And so it comes at a heavy toll. It's a very rapid and very volatile technology. Of all the technologies that abide within the greater eco habitat, I would submit that those that are within the Web3 sphere happen to be exceedingly volatile, but there's great lucrative promise and opportunity. Mandy, I ask you this. Wellness in Web3, from your lens, as someone that works with an incredible amount of professionals every day when it comes to wellness, what does that look like?
Yeah, so there's so much I could say to that. So I'll try to condense as much as I can and then hopefully get into some more. So we are trying to keep up with our technology, and it's ever changing very quickly. And that in and of itself is a good thing, and it's a difficult thing. It's like all the superpowers that we have, so to speak, there's also the kryptonite to it, right? And just as a few quick stats, just from 2019 to 2021, again, other factors other than being online going into this, but 500% increase in mental health problems just in that short period of time when the pandemic happened. And then things became, the push for technology really accelerated even more. And the good part, as some of you were saying, is the social and financial investment that's happening from the Web3 development and, metaverse is amazing. And it's going to give wonderful opportunities, as Alison and Bei were saying already, for the individual. However, there's real neurobiological issues that are happening that people, I hope, can be aware of and get education and support around, just by the mere nature that we're not having face-to-face relationships as much. There's a reduction in that. There's a reduction in meaningful activity outside of being online, which leads to lower self-esteem, more internet addiction issues, things like that. Literally to the point where when we are interacting like this, our brain isn't recognizing it as a primal way of, or our primal brain isn't recognizing it as a way of socialization. So our need to have that balance is going to be so important still. Well, this is going to be there's no way around it. This is advancing, it's going to happen, but there's going to need to be some real, very thought out systems in place to help people. And we really need more networks that are going to serve as a platform that specialize in digital mental health.
Indeed. Thank you, Mandy. Evan, turning the light on to you. You are an expert in XR, and audience, for those that are joining us, you've arrived at 3 a discussion on wellness in Web3. And when we talk about XR, it's an acronym of extended reality. You may be more familiar with it, many of you, when we talk about virtual and augmented reality. And a central part of when we talk about the metaverse, if you will, which is slated and forecasted by 2030 to quite possibly be a $13 trillion plus economy, such an economic engine for these times. And when we talk about virtual beholdings, if you will, as we get here, correspond with one another in virtual settings, which has become more familiar with us than it has been in times past. Evan, from an XR narrative, looking at the marriage pairing of Web3 and the relatability of XR, and I've known you to be an essential and very forefront leader in XR with good regard. What are you looking at when we look at Web3, XR, and community?
Well, first off, thank you for saying that I'm a forefront speaker in the space. Coming from yourself is an honor. I think it comes back to what Mandy was saying there about balance. There's just so many new technologies that are impacting us. And when we look at the XR, I look at Web3 and XR as the next evolution of the internet and just making everything more accessible, engaging, and impactful. And we have to look at how are we using that technology now that it is more accessible, that it is more engaging, which could be more addicting when we look at like how TikTok's taken off right now. Imagine 10 years down the road when we're all in an AR headset or XR headset that has AR capabilities and we can't turn it off because it's always in our peripheral vision or things along those lines. So it's really about finding that balance. But I think the technology can have that impact, like Alison was saying, of it can reach that worldwide accessibility if we do it correctly, and it can engage people in something that could be bad, but it can engage people in education where they're now learning new skills that they can apply in the real world, and then having that impact. It can either be a good impact on somebody's life, but then yes, there are a lot of possible downsides of that impact. So it is really about finding that balance ourselves as creators and developers, and how do we push that balance on people and make sure that they're educated on how to have that balance, but then also as an individual looking at how are you using this technology and how do you have that balance, kind of like a work-life balance, but an XR Web3 balance and life balance.
Indeed. Alison, is the future of Web3 sustainable?
Well, I think it depends on many things. I think we'd all want to say absolutely yes, it is, but to do that, we've got to do a lot of work, haven't we? Because if we look at how much of the world, the globe, is engaged in Web3 at the moment, it's tiny. And if we're going to bring everybody on and have mass adoption, we need two things. We need the whole concept of education, and I see education in the sense of gaining new knowledge of what is Web3. And many people will say the lingo, what all the different bits of knowledge are. I see it as learning the tools, learning how to actually engage with Web3. You can't engage about it if you don't have wallets and understand blockchain and metaverse. But the most important thing for me is the education around the culture. We're talking about a whole new way of being, and therefore you can't just acquire new knowledge and therefore then operate in a different way. You actually have to really help people understand that we are moving from a centralized to a more decentralized way. And actually that means a whole new way of being in the space, engaging with people as well. So I think we need to do a whole lot around that element. We need to do a whole lot around scalability. And then we also need to do a whole lot around interoperability. And the reason I focus on that element is because if we want Web3 to be accessible and inclusive, we have to secure interoperability so I can travel across the platforms, I can take my assets anywhere, and therefore I don't have to duplicate that. And therefore that makes that easier. So I think for me, it's education, it's scaling up, and therefore it's about interoperability. And the final bit is about equipping future generations with the career opportunities that exist in the Web3 environment.
Indeed. Much of what you said, Alison, and thank you, really speaks to an open metaverse when we start talking about interoperability, of virtual ingress and egress. For the audience with us, it lends to ask, what is the metaverse to you from your lens? Get us in that chat box and engage with us on that discussion. Bei, Straightfire is building very advanced technology that, along with Metacampus and a host of other different platforms that have come to sojourn with us. Straightfire is very advanced. We had an opportunity to hear from Straightfire earlier, as you said, in the year at our annual summit at GatherVerse 2022. Alison mentions education. Here we are building incredibly advanced technologies. Evan, you know about this as well. And these technologies are not a thing where it's a few months and we see incremental advancements alone. We're seeing great shifts that are happening and sizable with great traction and adoption. Yet at the same time, some of these technologies within the Web3 sphere and the metaverse, if you will, are difficult for not only the consumer to wrap their mind around, but also for the technologists themselves. How do we keep up as a platform that is building incredible technology, what does that look like from Straightfire, from your lens, to bring people and not leave us?
Well, to be honest, we are not, our goal is not to really like keep people on one platform. Because for us, the metaverse is, there's one metaverse and it's ever changing, ever evolution. And Alison just mentioned interoperability. We see different platforms out there. And I think that is the direction that it's truly create this decentralized, but also creator-driven that's experience. And for us, actually, we tend to kind of use the development of the platform Straightfire to also show a minimum viable metaverse experience, because we feel like in the past years, we already see here and there a different viable metaverse experience, because it's not just like one platform, but it's currently what we are having. This experience is also a kind of metaverse experience. It's about our Zoom call. It's about our online shopping. It's about the immersive experience that education world we're trying to create, for example, to get our students to learn about history. It's also the efforts like from the health world that they are trying to create like remote diagnose. So for us, it's we just want to be part of it. It's not like we try to dominate a platform on that. And I think that is, again, should be open-mindedness for everyone. And one thing I want to also share with you is while I'm also teaching my student, or not teaching is a big word, it's trying to inspire our students to also one fundamental kind of, I would say, a perspective I said is try to be open-minded, and also it is a going process. It's not like there's a certain phase and this is the end goal. I think this is just the beginning of everything. And also we want the student to especially pay attention to the narratives, because if the narratives is very one-sided, then that is not the direction it's supposed to go. Because again, we talk about decentralized, it's a democratization of the platform. So yeah, I just want to explain that.
Alison, decentralization. Can you give us something on that?
Decentralization. I mean, I think this is something that everyone is going to have to get their head around at the moment, whether you're a brand jumping into a metaverse and suddenly thinking, oh, I'm going to set up a shop front that resembles what it looks like in the high street, that I would say in the UK, or it's going to be a college campus. Actually, people who are really engaged in Web3 are very much saying, we want to be a partner, and not a partner where we kind of just you own our data and you utilize that. We want to be here. We want to be helping to shape so that then this service really does meet our need. So for me, I believe that companies need to get their head around decentralization. We need actually even everyone. I mean, we're not used to it. We've grown up in an era where we've been centralized. Everything's been controlled and taken away from us. We need to understand what that means, and we need to know how to engage with it in that way. It also means communities are going to be established in which the balance of power will change, because actually where you might have had communities set up that were from certain groups, certain ethnicity, certain genders, all of this is going to change now with the onset that everybody can join. I won't say join the party. They can be in that community and they can have the opportunity to vote in that community, to have the power in that community, which could mean decisions we see are made can look very different when you have a much more diverse community making them, as opposed to what people would say we've all experienced with the centralized system, with what often people will say groups of white men making those decisions. Yeah. So I think we've got to be really aware that it's going to be fundamentally different.
Indeed. Mandy, hold, because we're getting ready to go and jump into a whole well of wellness. But Evan, first, Alison brings up community. Let's go back for a moment, shall we all? Let's go to Web 2. A big part of Web 2, we all know, or may not, audience, when we talk about Web 2, we talk about centralization. We see great mega platforms that have erected themselves on the face of this earth, if you will, that have brought in millions and billions of communities together, such as Meta and Twitter and Discord and so many other different platforms that centralize people in ways we had never really have ever seen before, through the annals of time, if you will, of exchange, of a communication. I bring this up is because we know that with the community fosters wellness. Evan, now that we're entering into a different sphere, from not only looking and staring at screens and touching screens and interacting with one another, but finding ourselves going into these environments and being in the experience itself. With XR specifically, when we look at community, because Web3 will thrive within these communities, are we seeing a healthy approach to the new community structure that's forming before our eyes?
Yeah, I think we're seeing both in different areas. I think going back to Mandy's point right from the start of our primal brains don't see this as a connection when we're just connecting over video. I don't know the exact scientific research into the primal brains of VR meetings, but I know our team at XpertVR, every Monday we meet in VR for our Monday morning meeting. We have our boardroom, whiteboards and everything, and then we'll go play a game afterwards. And I don't know, we'll fight dragons or play paintball or all kinds of different games we play every Monday. And having that connection where we're all jumping into a room, and the platform we use right now is called Remio. They have like a basketball court and a driving range and a bunch of different games. So we'll all jump in and people are playing games in the morning and we're chatting as we're playing games. And then we're like, okay, everyone's here. Let's go move over to the boardroom. And we all walk together to the boardroom and we have that meeting. And I know I'm part of a bunch of other like education communities where we meet up in VR chat or Altspace or different platforms as well and have those meetings. And I feel like having a community in that way, at least for myself, we've made much better connections, and it feels like you know that person, and it can be strange because you'll recognize their avatar, but maybe not recognize them when you see their photo on LinkedIn or something along those lines. And then you still need to build that human connection a little bit more of like the actual, what that person actually looks like and how they are in the real world, quote unquote. But I do think having that VR space to meet up builds much more of a connection, a much better community, and gives a lot more flexibility on what you can do in that space, and being able to have a space that is growing and evolving as the community grows and evolves as well.
Indeed. Thank you, Evan. Mandy, safe spaces. We talk about social media, of some spaces that aren't necessarily so safe and healthy. We talk about the advent of technology where people have found themselves quite uncomfortable in the XR space, yet some others have found themselves quite comfortable and find that it's a place where they can thrive in. You do a lot of listening, I suspect, in your profession to a lot of different people and a lot of observations daily, if you will. Our approach to Web 2, some might argue that it hasn't been the healthiest, in that we've been moving so fast with the development of technologies that have arisen that there hasn't been enough consideration for even regulation, let alone the understanding of emotional and mental wellness and community centralization. I bring this up is because we know that Web3 fosters communities. We're seeing communities pop up all over the place with crypto assets and NFT communities and artist communities. And now, even as of late, AI art communities are popping up everywhere, which will take this AI art and translate it into an NFT and run it through the blockchain to solidify that transaction. Mandy, when we talk about community, we know that it could be healthy and maybe not so healthy because of different social spaces and isolation. Bring us into your world of what you've been looking at in this Web2 view and help us to and guide us towards not making some of the same mistakes that we've made for years now, and so that we can make better steps. If you can equip us, we're listening.
Awesome. Thanks for that question. It's a big question with a lot of components to it, for sure. And, as we've all been saying, this has such potential for so many good things. The being able to interact with more community and have a better type of connection than what is already created online is very important. As Evan was just saying, and the bond that comes from doing something more realistic within a community or with your friends or whatever it may be is a much better feel than just chatting through DM or doing something that's kind of secondarily removed from that. However, back to my earlier statistic and how much mental health issues have risen, no matter what the reason is. There is a lot of research that talks about the impact of social media on mental health and being online on mental health. And so that does play a significant part into it. So either way, there are severe mental health concerns happening globally in the world. And if this is the way our world is going, then there's going to have to be some sort of someone regulating regulatory guidelines. What we've found so far is even within our own laws, we'll take the state of Georgia. Our laws have not kept up to our technology. One of the biggest things that I see in my practice or working with young people especially is the grooming things that can happen, the predator, there's not enough guidelines around safety or regulations to even keep up with that. And so without awareness and education, and I have to educate my clients on what our laws are and then what is accessible on the internet, because they don't know. No one's teaching them that. And that's just one component of it. In terms of mental health and communities as well, our Web2 and the social media that we have now and things like that, it's very much designed to keep you hooked into it. So addiction to internet's gone up greatly. And especially aside from that, attention spans have gone down significantly. So people who are typically more focused and productive are finding themselves less focused and less productive. Now add someone on who has ADHD or anxiety who already struggles with that. So there's going to have to be understandings and support groups and education around all of these things around keeping it safe. I think that having the guidelines, like if you have an art group or there's, a D&D group or whatever it is, that's now in the Web3, some form of very strategic and very concrete and specific ways to regulate that in terms of, language, in terms of what's being talked about, in terms of, what's picked up on what people are saying that could be of a emotional or mental health concern. And then all of that too, going back to, we're still neurobiologically wired for people in person and to be out in nature. And so a lot of this is going to be people having to understand what their limits are and what they aren't. I saw someone earlier had a question about balance, if it's something that can be learned or not. It absolutely can be learned, but it's a very personalized thing. I know that I have to be out in nature as a part of my medication, if you will, because it does good things for me, you know? And so there's definitely this balancing act that will have to happen with that. And there's so many things could go deeper into with that, but just those are my initial thoughts around it.
Where does one go that may find themselves, and Mandy, this is a follow-up for you, that may find themselves in a situation of isolation where they become inundated with this technology, which one can find themselves in such a position. What do they do to free themselves from such shackle?
Yeah. I just did an article recently called Linked and Lonely. We're connected more than ever, and we're also statistically the loneliest we've ever been. And so that says a lot right there. The good thing, though, is that teleservices are everywhere now. If you haven't been able to get to a therapist before, you know, because of where you're at, or maybe there's, depression going on. So just the thought of even getting out feels like too much, or whatever it may be, you can now, with a click, find a therapist, reach out to one of them and, start talking through what's going on, or a psychiatrist. It's very easy to get to now, versus it wasn't before. And there's all sorts of online support groups that are there and in place. The National Alliance of Mental Illness, NAMI, that's a very common one that a lot of people know about. Psychology Today, they have a whole internet platform full of resources of therapists, support groups, treatment centers, clinicians, and a lot of these programs now have virtual components to them. So my encouragement to people is that if you're feeling that way, it gets worse over time if you don't do something about it. It's not like just a snap out of it one day type of thing, and to take your own emotional and mental wellness seriously.
Absolutely. Audience, for those that are chopping wood and planting seed with us, we ask that you share this story out to a neighbor, to a colleague, to your Twitter and LinkedIn. Let them know what's being said here. We need more hearts with us to share in this experience, and also be able to like and subscribe with us here at GatherVerse. Let's move to the future. And this is a very interesting perspective lens that NFTs, non-fungible tokens, they're not new. In fact, most of these technologies that we're talking about, they're not new, they're emerging. And often a thing or event can catalyze and accelerate the emergence itself and really move technologies that have been sitting on the shelf and bring them into a future sense. In 2020, we found ourselves met with the pandemic, COVID-19, and that accelerated us into virtual communication. Whether we liked it or not, it's where we wound up. And for many companies and platforms, they found a great opportunity to thrive and to create even greater sustainability within the virtual hybrid workforce that now exists. And these are things that we weren't expecting to see, perhaps maybe for the further years to come, but yet here we are. Now, I bring up the NFT because in 2020, not too many people were talking about it, but then circling into 2021, we saw such an accelerated discussion and so many financial transactions that were astronomically high that we haven't seen. And that was in the course of a turn of a year. And we're still seeing great acceleration, and in some areas in respect, a slowdown. What is coming around the corner, and what should we be mindful of? And I ask this in sincerity because those who are listening, we need to have a better sense on where we're going, because the technology is moving so fast. And unfortunately, the curriculum and development and educational platforms move at such a slow pace to teach that in time or real time delivery is sometimes becoming the most efficient way for us to be able to get our information of this world that's become cutting edge. Bei, where are we headed?
Good question. And I do want to share it with you guys because my team and me in 2020, when we started to research on NFT, we actually identified 4 core, we call them the core values of NFTs. Back then, at the end of 2020 and beginning of 2021, we said the core value factors of NFTs are scarcity, utility, and then provenance, and then human emotion. So while we said that like more than a year ago, and then we actually see happen in the market that it kind of like go along this way. First, we have all these Bored Ape of this world. So it ticked the box of scarcity. And then because people all seek to like second market to try to sell because I hold the most rare one and then you see a lot of NFT projects starting to talk about the utility of it. And then, of course, we also witness a lot of very hollow promise saying, okay, you hold the NFT and you will lead to this. But there are some truths there. There's a lot of like good faith of the utility developments, but there are also a lot of them still speculative. And then actually right now, we started to see the emphasis on provenance, because provenance is a word we hear a lot from the art world. It's about this origin, where it's from, and then the whole story goes it. And actually, we also predict and foresee that the moment when we started to use less the term NFT, because NFT is the tech term, but more really like maybe using other terms to in different field, for example, digital collectibles or maybe digital membership. And we were at school also exploring maybe develop certificates as NFT, or even maybe future of our passport will be in NFT. So and also in the e-commerce world, there's a lot of cases you see like NFT is no longer being used as the word itself, but it's more like it's even giving out as free, almost like your access, your membership of a physical product. So I think those are very healthy development. So now this is how people started to develop the provenance. But then we think that NFT is very much highly bounded with the human emotion. And because back then we used the example, like for each of us, the products, physical products, the value of it actually means differently for individuals. For example, I would never care about a Tesla car because, or expensive car because I don't drive. And then I will treasure maybe an ancient antique watch more because it's from my grandfather. So if we treat our physical assets with a lot of emotion in it, I'm sure that will also reflect in how we see the digital asset, i.e. NFT. So there's a historically low side, I think, both in the crypto market or the NFT, but I'm sure that this is the right time to see the real like healthy development. Of course, there are still a lot of speculative. It's the same goes for any new technology. There are always the bad phase and good phase. So we think that the word NFT you will hear less, and then you will start to hear more and more maybe other terms. Until that moment, I think that is you can call it NFT 2.0. We are probably already in an NFT 2.0. And let's hope that it's going to truly go to a healthy direction.
Indeed, Bei. Thank you. Evan, the future of XR when it comes to community and wellness, what does it look like from your lens, and what would you prefer it to look like?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a great connection with what Bei was talking about with NFTs there. And I agree. I think the term NFTs we should get away from, because there's a lot of memes and it's just not very connected with what the rest of the world understands outside of technologists. So yeah, I think right now, how XR is being used in community is kind of like what I mentioned before. It's a great meeting spot. It gives you that better connection, a space where you can actually engage and do more than just talk and give presentations. You can build things together and plan greater strategies and all kinds of different things, as well as just play games together. I think looking towards the future, connecting in those other technologies like NFTs, it's how do you have like maybe a clubhouse or a space in XR where there's a public space where everyone has access, and then there's a gated space where you have to have an NFT or whatever we call it, and to gain that you have to give to the community in some way or contribute in some way or be involved. And by being involved and actually being part of that community and not just joining the Discord and sending one chat to say hello, then you get that NFT and you get special access to the community, as well as maybe more voting power or things along those lines. My one worry with that is obviously that could start to make sure some people aren't included, and we want to make sure that this technology continues to be accessible for the most amount of people as possible. So I think those that benefit of having the special NFT to get into certain areas in an XR space in the community has to have certain goals that you have to achieve that anybody could achieve from anywhere in the world if they were putting in that sort of work into the community and giving back to the community in the ways that are outlined to gain that NFT.
Indeed, Evan. Alison, of corporations, of public and private sector, startups, if you will, meeting and building community within the metaverse and ecosystems, what does that future look like for you, and what would you like for it to be?
I think I want to say that I would like to briefly say something about what was just said about the NFTs, because I think what was being said was really great, and that's a way to get the public sector to adopt it. Because I think the problem is NFTs are seen as little pictures, or which will get you utility. I'm not undermining any of that. I've got loads on my wall, if you could see my wall, but actually we need people to think about it as non-fungible tokens. I think if we can get the public sector to recognize it as non-fungible tokens, the uniqueness of things, and that it can be contracts, and that it can be our identity, and it can be our certificates for our credentials, I think we could start to see much more mass adoption. And I think that comes to your question about, we need the public sector to absolutely look at Web3 in a different way, to see the benefits of Web3, and not just to be able to hold their meetings in and to have that kind of like real in life feeling or any of that, or to meet their customers and sell things to, but to really see the tools of Web3. And so for me, what we would see in the future is education systems across the globe are using the Web3 technology to teach children and young people about everything, whether it's finance, whether it's history, whether it's biology. Imagine having biology classes in the metaverse, or going into the metaverse to find out about history. You could bring it a lot more alive, and therefore you would make education more inclusive across the world as well by doing that. So I think we need large-scale adoption by public sector, and we need them to take strategic decisions about how the services that they control, which is our education and our health services, are going to utilize the Web3 tools to do business. We need to get them to see how, for instance, the health services across the world could utilize the NFT as a way to give everybody their health record. So it doesn't matter what country I go to or what state I go to, actually I'm carrying my health record and I can make that available and I can get the treatment I need rather than it being in one place. The same as educationists need to put our credentials as NFTs so that we carry them around with us. So if, for instance, I need to leave my country and I arrive at a new country, I'm not dependent on the state. I'm able to carry my identity with me and all my credentials. So I can then start engaging and making a contribution and earning my living in that. So we need mass adoption by the public sector. We need them to see how the tools could be much more effective in enabling them to deliver their work. I mean, if you imagine passport control, it was all on an NFT and we had that and we held that. You could actually, even environmental issues you'd start to address because you'd start to change how we do business. So public sector, we need them to really start taking strategic decisions about how they're going to utilize the tools of Web3. And in that way, we sometimes need Web3 people to be talking a bit more about how it's beneficial to the wider mass adoption and not just talk about crypto or NFTs in that way, because that won't make sense to a lot of people or they won't want to engage with that. So I feel it's kind of the coming together of the two. That's what I would like to see, a different conversation so that then the public sector and all the centralized bodies can benefit from the decentralized mindsets to really influence how we go forward as a society.
Alison, Bei, Evan, are there enough technologists to train and educate the public sector as a whole globally?
No, not at all. So there are companies starting up now to get more and more people equipped to be able to do that. And that's again why we need educationists to look at how they're going to do that and to deal with the young people. And then those who are old, who are already in their careers, they need to start to have much more access to education to equip them.
May I add one thing, because I also really call for more interdisciplinary and also cross-sectorial discussion, because I think if we look at now, I have no tech background, where I noticed that the whole discussion in Web3 is sometimes either fully dominated with tech terms, or it's really much like focusing on very commercial and like financial emphasis. While I think go back to also what Mandy just mentioned, it is also very important to involve all the social, cultural, psychological, ethical, moral, and maybe national, transnational discussion in it, because there's so many different elements that deserved to involved in this co-creation of this is how the new technology, because it's not just the technology itself, it's about business, it's about society, it's about life. So I miss that part in a lot of discussion, because often it's very much like emphasized or like having this heavy lift on one side. And I think really love what Alison just mentioned, because mass adoption, we hear that all the time. A lot of people discuss that, but I think even it's not being discussed cross-sectorial, not interdisciplinary. So I think maybe that's the first step.
Mandy, it seems. Oh, Evan, please go ahead.
Yeah, just to quickly add, I would completely agree with Bei there, and it makes me think of like my grandma. She just turned 90, and 10 years ago, I wouldn't have at all wanted to give her a cell phone to try and teach her how to use that. But over the past 10, 20 years, technologists have been having those conversations with users, with industry, to understand how they use this. And now it's so simple that I can hand my grandma who's 90 an iPhone, and she can use Messenger to talk to the family or do a video chat and do those types of things. And it's that evolution of having those conversations to understand how do users use this technology, and how do we make it easy for them to use the technology?
So it seems to me, from what's been shared and submitted, that in order for us to scale with a sense of wellness and greater wellness, that a bit of education is going to be needed for public and private sector and for technology educational institutions to better understand where we're at with these cutting edge approach technologies within the ecosystem as a whole. Very enlightening. Mandy, I must ask that from your lens, is education the true path to better understanding wellness? And if so, what are the first steps from you with the few minutes that we have?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think education is vital. You know, we have physical education in schools growing up, but we don't have mental health education in schools growing up, and that's a real problem. And a lot of people who lived with anxiety maybe, or whatever it may be all their life, who realized that as adults looking back, realized that, oh, I've had this for all my life. I just didn't know what it was. And so education is, and how we get education out to people and the various topics around, the education, like all those, Bei, I loved what you were saying of all the different categories of people that need to be a part of designing these educational systems and a way to get it out so that everybody knows about it. As far as like what it will look like, I think it's going to have to be something that's ever evolving and ever growing, and that needs to be at the forefront of whatever is created and is being done in the Web3. Earlier, you were talking, Chris, about the sustainability, and the sustainability is only going to be as sustainable as the people who are making it and creating it. There's so much increased burnout and, with the amount of, so people trying to keep up with it, creating their own technology to put into the Web3 and the mental health issues that come with that. So people are going to have to understand that taking care of themselves is priority for things in general to evolve and be successful. And so a lot of people don't know what that looks like, though. A lot of people don't even know what their own needs are, what their own emotional understanding is, or psychological understanding. And so it's really, in my opinion, I think a crucial part of the well-being of our future in general.
Alison, Evan, Bei, Mandy, we thank you for your time. We certainly could go the distance, but this is all we have for now. We want to wish you the best in your future explorations. We're so happy to have you be part of the GatherVerse community. To our audience, stick around. We have a lot more coming up, including Sandy Carter, the Senior Vice President of Unstoppable Domains. We're very much looking forward to her share. May our Gather continue to be well. Thank you, and we'll be right back.
Thank you, everyone.